Hello and welcome to this week's live chat where we're going to learn how to get lean even on a plant-based diet as a vegan. I'm saying even as a vegan because oftentimes we're under the presumption that it is very difficult to get in enough protein in order to build muscle, in order to lean out and look really defined on a plant-based diet. And I just want to preface this by saying that I am an omnivore, as most of you know, and I do think for the general population, it is going to be more advantageous to include animal products into their diet in order to achieve physique goals, but also health goals, simply because um, it is going to be easier to adhere to in the long run, and also because I do believe that without the proper guidance, most people are going to develop some deficiencies when it comes to a plant-based diet without actually paying particular attention to certain micronutrients and macronutrients. Nonetheless, it is absolutely achievable to get lean and defined as a vegan on a plant-based diet. I have also written a blog about this before. If you're interested, head over to the website. Under blogs, just simply type in vegan or plant-based into the search bar and you should find the whole article, which is actually quite in depth. But nonetheless, we are going to talk about the most important pointers in this week's live call also. So to start off with, I do want to clarify that the general principles for weight loss or weight gain remain the same on a plant-based or vegan diet, meaning that you need to be in a calorie deficit in order to lose weight, and you need to be in a calorie surplus in order to put on weight or put on muscle, however you want to say that. And of course, if you maintain calorie balance, so consuming as many calories as you are actually burning, you're gonna stay at the same weight. You can still achieve body recomposition, so increase muscle, decrease fat at maintenance as well. In order to make sure that you are losing fat and not muscle in a calorie deficit, you also need to ensure that you're consuming enough protein. In fact, you should be making sure that you're consuming the right amount of protein in general in order to retain or maintain your current muscle mass, even if you're not interested in gaining more muscles. But being lean generally means showing muscle definition and being sculpted well, as opposed to looking skinny fat. So that is what we want to avoid, and that is what protein is going to help us with. Those principles we always need to remember. So if someone thinks that going on a vegan diet is going to help them lose weight, period, that is not necessarily the case. You can also consume a lot of calories through bread, through nut butters, and so on as a vegan and actually gain weight. Therefore, it is important to just like keep that in mind as your baseline. However, many people initially lose weight when they go on a more plant-based diet because they are cutting out a lot of, well, A, highly processed things, which of course inhibit weight loss in many aspects or make it easier to go into a calorie surplus. And B, also they feel less inflamed from those processed foods. And C, a lot of animal products, if you don't pay attention to them, paired with sugar or highly refined oils, etc. They are just generally super high in calories and again make it easier to go into a calorie surplus. So that is why some people lose weight when going on a vegan diet, but in general, going on any diet or achieving weight loss on any diet requires being in a calorie deficit. Apart from that, I also want to state that I do think that having plants or having vegetables and fruit and nuts and legumes and stuff like that as a foundation or as a good portion of your diet is most certainly beneficial for everybody, even if you are consuming animal products. So, for example, I do try to get 80-90% of my dietary intake from whole foods, and about I do want to say probably about half of that or Yeah, probably about half of that is, plants of some sort, whether that is potatoes, whether that is berries or fruit or some legumes, etc., if you count them towards plants as well. So, generally speaking, I don't think that something like um, a purely meat-based diet, carnivore diet, etc., is the end all be all, or is actually beneficial for most people, the majority of people. And likewise, I don't think that veganism is beneficial for most people. However, if someone chooses to go on a plant-based diet for um, the love of the animals or just for ethical reasons, I actually want to support them, and that's why I have created these slides essentially. I do want to encourage people to do a lot of research when it comes to going on a vegan diet for environmental reasons. There is a lot of back and forth and controversial information out there as to, if the whole entire world was plant-based, would we actually be emanating less CO2? And also, would we actually be able to support everybody? That is a question out there because a lot of people think, if I go on a vegan diet is definitely good for the environment, and that's not necessarily the case depending on what you consume also. So just make a smart decision. Don't go on a vegan diet just because you think it's going to help you with weight loss, and also don't go on a vegan diet just because you think, oh, you heard from one person that it is good for the environment or whatever. So choose your reasons wise, and if it's mostly for health or health reasons, or because you want to achieve physique goals, then I would say an omnivore diet, mostly that includes a lot of plants, is most likely going to be more beneficial for you. So, what do we want to do in order to achieve a lean body as a vegan? We want to set our calories. So again, if you want to go into a calorie deficit, we want to have our normal deficit of probably somewhere between minus 5 to 20% of your calorie maintenance. If you choose to recomposition, add maintenance, figure out your maintenance calories, you can use various calorie calculators for that. You can use the Harris-Benedict formula for that. You can simply observe your calorie average and your weight for a while and then figure out and calculate your calorie maintenance calories that way too. Next, of course, we want to set our macros and most importantly, protein. So as a vegan, you're probably going to struggle a little bit more getting in sufficient protein. So even getting in somewhere about 0.7 or 0.8 grams of protein per pound of goal body weight can be a struggle for some that don't like tofu or seitan and etc. That much. However, I would say at the very, very least, you should be aiming for 0.7 grams of protein per pound of goal body weight. 0.8 would be better. Ideally leaning towards that 1 gram of protein per pound of goal body weight, or even 1.2. However, that is going to be quite tricky for a lot. It is most likely going to require you incorporating at least 1 serving of protein powders per day, ideally probably 2, to make that easier for you to hit, especially if you are a larger individual. You could also consider, is there a little bit of leeway to what you consider veganism? Would you be happy to include egg whites, or would you be happy to include seafood from time to time? Those kind of things, it doesn't always have to be black and white for everybody. But next, we also want to consider, the ratio between carbs and fats, and be mindful that a lot of the vegan protein sources are kind of mixed macros. It's not as clear cut as on an omnivore diet, often where we can say egg whites and chicken breast and whitefish are pretty much pure protein, and then you have your pure fats and your pure carbs. Of course, you still have your oils and all of that on a vegan diet too, but then you often rely more on beans that are like a little bit of carb, a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat. or tofu, again, same sort of thing. So just consider that, and consider how low you can set your fat in order to still fit those foods in, and make sure that depending on how much you train, so if you are a very active individual, I would lean towards the higher side of carbs and slightly lower side of fats. Again, still making sure you're able to fit in some of the healthier nuts and seeds where you can get lots of your micronutrients from that you require in order to not get deficient in anything. But generally speaking, it's probably going to be a reasonably I guess, moderate distribution of all of them. So perhaps something like 30% of your calories coming from protein, 30 from fats, and 40 from carbs, or something along those lines. So next, what foods do we actually want to eat? Obviously, we want to avoid any kind of animal products. I would personally recommend staying away from most type of mock meats that have kind of become super popular. So mock meats as in like that fake kind of vegan chicken, or fake at the supermarket, they're popping up everywhere. But oftentimes when you look at the list of ingredients, it's like 30 ingredients, half of them are fillers and preservatives and additives and blah, 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 just in order to achieve a similar sort of flavor. I would probably stick with cleaner things, such as mentioned down there as well, organic tofu, organic tempeh, really, really making sure that those kind of soy products are coming from organic sources, because they are often heavily laden with pesticides if they're not purchased organic, and of course also making sure that they're GMO free. So just pay particular attention to that. And in order to avoid further deficiencies, you really want to make sure you're getting a good balance of greens, seeds, nuts, legumes, grains, starches, fruit. So variety is going to play a bigger role on a plant-based diet than it does on an omnivore diet. You're likely going to have to put more time into your meal planning, into your pre-logging macros, in order to even get close to the protein intake. So that is why I said earlier it's probably going to be easier adherence-wise to have an omnivore approach. If you want to achieve aesthetic goals, you're going to have to put in more time to achieve the same results on a vegan diet. That is what I meant. And you can help out with some extra things on top of your protein powders, on top of your tofu, etc., to achieve your protein target. For example, spirulina is actually reasonably high in protein, just consideration of grams. Yeast powder is reasonably high, so just adding like a tablespoon of dried yeast over your meal, that can sometimes help. Or like, let's just say that could be, it sometimes gives a little bit of a cheesy kind of flavor. So if you have bean pasta with a marinara sauce that includes textured soy protein as like your bolognese, I guess, vegan approach, but not necessarily mock meat. And then you sprinkle yeast powder on top of that. That is like here your vegan high protein bolognese substitution. Powdered nut butters, or nut powdered nut butters, yes, I guess you could say that, are lower in fat than regular nut butters. So mixing your own, that can be another way to kind of trick or help yourself with your protein targets. So those would be some tips as to what to eat. Obviously, as I said, any kind of other plant-based thing is going to be included in here also. And really, what I would also recommend, that, because for example, MyFitnessPal, which is what I am tracking my calorie intake with, and most of my clients are too, is a great app. However, it's not as transparent when it comes to the micronutrients. It usually includes the main ones, such as calcium, such as I think it includes iron, and on all maybe like 5 or 10 others. But other trackers, such as Chronometer, is going to give you a lot more detail as to whether you're hitting your micronutrients. Because that also brings me to the next point. You do need a supplement with more things as a vegan in general. So again, we mentioned like plant-based protein powders, and it is helpful if you purchase some that include digestive enzymes, because plant-based protein powders can sometimes be harder to digest. So again, you're giving your gut a lot more stress here, and a vegan diet tends to be kind of stressful on your gut often too, because it's generally higher in fiber. So fiber is great, but if it's very, very high fiber all the time, um, your gut might have a hard time keeping up with that. So protein powder that is organic, GMO free, includes digestive enzymes, and ideally doesn't contain artificial sweeteners, then you're most likely going to have to incorporate an omega-3. I mean, everybody, even omnivores, usually benefit from an omega-3 supplementation. However, here, be very, very mindful that a lot of the algae omega-3s, or chia omega-3s, or flaxseed omega-3s, are purely the omega-3 fatty acid called ALA. ALA, so while that might look high on the nutrition panel, ALA needs to be converted by the body into DHA and EPA, which are the two omega-3 fatty acids that our body actually uses to fight inflammation. And that conversion process is super, super poorly. It's only like 20% of your ALA is at a maximum is actually transferred into DHA or EPA. So that means you're often consuming, well, wasting a lot of money, first of all, but also consuming a lot of fats, like from flaxseed and so on. And only 20% is actually being used. So really be mindful that you're getting the right omega-3 supplementation. You can get DHA and EPA from particular algae, but you need to look out for that. And most of your vegan omega-3 supplements are going to be ALA because it's cheaper to be produced. So pay attention to that. And as most people that go on a vegan diet or plant-based diet know, is watching out for vitamin B, particularly B12. So that is you're going to have to supplement with that. You should also certainly supplement with creatine. Many studies are showing, or basically all studies are showing, benefit of creatine for recovery and also for brain function for anybody. But in all studies, it is very clear that vegans benefit from it the most. So this should be a non-negotiable for you. Most people probably at least 3 grams per day, probably closer to the 5. If you're larger and training a lot, I'd say probably 10 grams per day. Also, generally speaking, I'm not somebody who's advertising for essential amino acids or branched chain amino acids, but again, for vegans, this can actually be very, very helpful too. Not because you can't get all amino acids through a plant-based diet. However, the absorption rate is a little bit poorer of your proteins on a plant-based diet, because they are often hidden in the plants, and combined with, like, in a bean, again, combined with carbs and fats and so on. So it's not as absorbed as easily as if it's a pure protein source. So you could even do something like drinking EAAs with like twice a day with your main meals. Or if you're training fasted, most certainly consuming your EAAs. I prefer EAAs over BCAAs, branched chain amino acids, and I've done a whole live chat on EAAs and branched chain amino acids also, where I'm basically also explaining that EAAs includes all the essential amino acids, whereas branched chain amino acids only include a few of them. So we might as well cover all of them just in case, as opposed to only hitting a few of them with the branched chain amino acids. It is also likely that you're going to have a harder time getting in all your iron, all your calcium. Most people, generally speaking, whether omnivore or not, benefit from vitamin D and magnesium. So, those could be additional things to address. But, excuse me, certainly watch out for any kind of deficiencies. A lot of people initially going on a vegan diet feel great for a few months even, and then like 8 months onwards, the actual deficiencies start to show, sometimes even in a form of mental health issues in form of depression and so on. So we really want to catch those kind of things early on that are often being traced back to a deficiency in vitamin B and some other things such as iron, etc. So be mindful. If you're going into a vegan diet, as I mentioned, give your digestive system a chance to keep up with it, because if you're on a classical omnivore diet, it's likely you're consuming maybe about 20 grams of protein per day. If you're suddenly shifting most of your calories towards beans and more vegetables and so on, you might double that, if not more. So if from one day to another, your gut has to keep up with that, you're going to get constipated, you're going to have really crazy bloating. So just slowly ease into it, as opposed to changing everything from one day to another. Our gut is really adaptive, but it needs time. It doesn't like big changes. So pay attention to your fiber. Once again, you can see that in your calorie and macro tracker also. Now, as I also mentioned before, ask yourself about the why. Ask yourself, are you willing to look at all these potential deficiencies you're creating? Ask yourself, are you doing it for the environment, or are you really doing it because you think it's better for your physique? And again, here I encourage you to look at the actual research, and please feel free to reach out to me also. I'm more than happy to provide some links to studies, etc., that are kind of like showing the benefits of things like chicken and fish and so on for body composition also. But in any case, the most important thing is usually calories and macros, and not creating any micronutrient deficiencies. Ask yourself, does it have to be all or nothing? Am I happy to include eggs here and there, or fish here and there, or whatever? And once again, look out for long-term symptoms early on, very early on, and be honest with yourself. I have heard that over and over and over again, and people coming to us saying, yeah, so I'm feeling really, really low in energy. I'm kind of having, you know, digestive issues here and there. I'm feeling like mentally up and down. Um, oh yeah, what have you changed in the last, year or two? Yeah, it might be things like mm, losing a job or changing jobs, but then that being paired with a huge dietary change and just cutting out all meat or animal products. So watch out early on and be very mindful of what you might be causing if you're not doing it the right way. Also, as always, as an omnivore, also consider meal frequency. You do want to pay attention to that even more so as a vegan, because certain things are harder to digest, as I said. So what some vegans tend to do really well with is a smoothie in the morning, because it's kind of pre-digested, or cooked oats, because it's also easier to absorb as opposed to raw oats. And then for lunch, which is when your digestive system usually is ramping up or ramped up the highest, that's when you can have more of the raw and harder to digest things, such as a salad. But then in the evening, your digestive tract is not doing quite that well again. So here's something like stews, like curries, like soups are probably gonna allow for the best sleep and digestion throughout the night, as opposed to big salads in the evening. So just be mindful of those little things and hacks, and you're probably gonna have an easier time with digestion if you include more frequent and smaller meals. Also in terms of helping you to hit your protein intake, as opposed to just like having just 2 meals and achieving that 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of whole body weight is going to be very, very difficult on a plant-based diet. Yes, so I mentioned the cooked and blended in terms of energy also. In terms of, the motto of this live chat, which is being lean on a vegan diet, we obviously also need to make sure that our training is in the right spot. That is the same as for omnivores. We want to progressively overload, so meaning increasing training volume as you go, but having deload phases and rest days and so on in between, in order to give your body the chance to catch up and actually achieve that super compensation which we want to achieve. So we're setting a training stimulus, which essentially forces your body to get stronger to keep up with it or to be more prepared for that same stimulus next time. However, if you're way overreaching, you're going to fatigue it. If you're not reaching high enough, no adaptation is going to occur. So we slowly want to build that up. And most of the time, that requires you to hit each muscle group at least twice per week. That is why often people that come to us with like, hey, I'm doing 3 days a week, which is totally fine and great, but two of those might be, or two of those might be an upper body day, and then one day is like a lower body day. And that's just not enough in order to stimulate a nice growth for your lower body, just as an example. Do keep in mind, though, that we do want to avoid overtraining, overdoing it. So not all workouts have to mean that you need to increase all weights. That's super unrealistic. Even if in one workout you're just increasing weights a little bit for one exercise, that's already great. Sometimes even just maintaining the same weights is actually progress. You should most of the time feel challenged, though, even but not push yourself to fatigue. Also, as for an omnivore, accuracy and consistency are playing some of the biggest roles here. So tracking is a helpful tool, particularly for vegans, in order to make sure you are actually hitting that protein. Adjust your calories when needed. Once again, reconsider, am I doing the right thing when I'm pregnant? In menopause, a vegan diet could also be quite tricky, just because sometimes it is beneficial having a higher fat, lower carb approach during menopause. Same with injuries, higher fats, lower carbs tends to be a little bit better at times, and actually higher protein even so. So just consider or keep reevaluating what you're doing at what stage within your life. I hope that this was somehow helpful in terms of plant-based diets or not. If you have any questions or feedback in regards to this live chat, I'd love to hear about it. And apart from that, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to talking to you next week.